We've got so many dynamic lights going on. Oh, that's perfect. Okay, yay! Oh, gosh. Thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
So lovely to have you here. I'm going to start with a bit of honesty. I am absolutely petrified right now. I feel like my heart is doing this. I feel like my eyes are doing this and my head's going all over the place. I know it's a build-up of my own kind of things that are going on. But I thought I could take this opportunity with you to use a little bit of your laughing therapy to see maybe how I feel now compared to how I feel after, and just to get a little bit more of an experimental, this is what it's like. I don't know how you feel about that.
That's a great suggestion. It reminds me of like a really powerful principle of alignment, which is if you take that difficult feeling of maybe feeling nervous and you align it with laughing, then you'll do a lot of laughing.
I always try to say to myself, if I'm feeling nervous, no, I'm feeling excited, because I'm aware that the two feelings are like side by side. So my first question would be then, what does that process look like?
So I would call it, it's often, there are techniques like laughter yoga or laughter size, but I often suggest that it could be called conscious laughter, because that's something everybody understands. There's a great exercise simply called the gradient laugh. Sounds a little bit weird, but the idea is that the formula, and it is a formula demonstrated by science for contagious laughter, is eye contact, which we're kind of able to do over this, and the sound ha ha ha, and proximity. So if you're in relative proximity, which is actually we're across an ocean, but we have faked proximity.
Yeah.
You should be able to laugh for real. And so the exercise is simply that you gently make the sound ha ha ha, and you gradually get and you gradually get louder. So the importance is to breathe. So I would take a deep breath in.
Okay.
We kind of make eye contact, which is kind of difficult,
I don't know
but
where
we
that
can
would
try.
be right now. I think I'm going to look at the picture of your face instead.
Yeah, that actually is the right answer, I think. So I will do that too. And then I would go. Beautiful laugh. What a beautiful laugh you have. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. You know what? It's so weird because laughter is such a nice, relaxing feeling to have, but I often feel quite restrained. Like I don't laugh enough, maybe. It isn't always necessarily something that feels comfortable where I think it should, because it's just a very kind of happy, nice thing.
Well, in fact, what you're describing is a condition that I think is epidemic, which is called over seriousness, that we live in either in times or in cultures that are very serious. And to be serious actually now can be measured in terms of heart health. So cardiologists are starting to notice that people that are extremely serious are also having heart problems.
Wow.
Which is kind of interesting. Then the explanation is that laughter, one of the effects of laughter is it dilates the small blood vessels, as opposed to stress conditions where we get very serious, so let's say angry or upset, we tighten our blood vessels. And over time, you spend a lot of time tightening your blood vessels, you actually harden them, and you may precipitate heart disease.
Damn. And that's something as well that I think people will readily get used to. Like it will start to become the norm.
Yeah.
And especially if other people around you are all doing the same, then it's kind of almost like a ripple effect, isn't it? But a ripple effect of the wrong things that we want to be feeling and experiencing, really. It reminds me a little bit of, I often go for walks around with one of my mentors, and he's awesome at just smiling and saying hello to absolutely everybody. And for me, I tend to find it a little bit uncomfortable. Like I enjoy it, but I'm so aware of the social constructs of it being like an odd thing. And even sometimes I will say hi and smile at somebody, but they might kind of just look at you like, what? what is this? But he does it without fail to absolutely every single person. And it's just so heartwarming. But I do think as a society, we've kind of forgotten all about that a little bit.
Smiling is a very interesting cultural phenomenon. I did research on it for way back, but it was quite intriguing that in certain East Bloc countries, excuse me, it is very unfashionable. Not just unfashionable, but it's a problem to smile in public randomly. It is culturally seen, and they will always explain it that people who smile in public are seen as being stupid. That's the explanation.
Well,
That's why places like Russia, you have a dour street culture. Now, I wouldn't say what's interesting is that Russians are no more. I wouldn't say are more dour than the rest of us, but their street culture is. You don't see them laughing or smiling on the street that much. And what's interesting is the further you go south on average. So in North America, this is very true that if you go as you go further and further south, people are more smiley and they are less smiley as you go north.
okay.
Yeah, but smiling is really important. There's a really great study, mind-blowing study that smile intensity in photographs predicts longevity. So what that isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
So as I understand, what the studies did is they took your pictures. So this would be, for example, your Facebook or wherever your social media photographs, but also your photographs of you at home. And they can measure smile intensity. So like a weak smile is where you're barely smiling at all. Big, intense smile, your big smile. If you have poor smile intensity across the range of your photographs, you tend to die younger. And what's interesting about it is it really suggests that there's a social mix component to smiling. So the explanation would not be that smiling itself makes you healthier. It's that if you found yourself in social situations where you were smiling and laughing or whatever, then you were more connected to your community and society and you had more reason to live.
It makes me think about if you was to be in a car crash, like most people tense up their bodies before they crash, and that tends to bring on more injuries. However, if someone, say, was unconscious in the car or asleep in the car, their body would be more relaxed, so they most likely wouldn't have as much damage to them. And that's what it makes me think about with smiling. Like, you're relaxed and you're happy, so your body is under less strain.
The other component of smiling is that smiling is a join in behavior where we smile together. Let's say you smile at me, I smile at you. I'm less in my head. I'm less trapped in me.
Yeah.
I'm more in the social.
It's a very easy way to connect with people as well, isn't it? Just smiling at someone. I think it naturally just brings down all the walls to a degree.
Yeah, and why isn't that interesting? There's a cliche that laughter breaks the ice in a so, but why? Why does it break the ice? And I would say it's kind of it's these demonstrations of shared humanity. One and two, there's a really interesting phenomenon. This is in one of my documentaries. I did a documentary where I noticed that in MMA, before every fight, there's a stare down. So fighters come out, they're posed together, and they stare at each other. One of the problems they have with the stare downs is that people often crack up, because if two people stare at each other and they're in close proximity, right back to the beginning of our talk, eye contact, close proximity, and the sound ha 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 produces contagious laughter. The reason I got so fascinated by this is I think that in that moment you're seeing the two choices that humans have in almost every situation, so eye contact produces tension in mammals. Mammals don't like to stare at each other. If they do, usually either it goes to conflict, or in the case of humans, it goes to laughter. And what laughter does is it opens the door to play. So same thing in a conversation, a cocktail party, we're having a nervous time, we're awkward and we don't know what to say. But if we laugh, then maybe jokes come, or we can say like, well, this is a awkward situation, isn't it? It allows us to play and then opens multiple doors to other. So this is why I say that laughter is the greatest revolution that ever happened on this planet. Because before we could do that, all we could do was fight or stare.
Yeah, so true. And I think as well, like laughter itself, it's not being so serious. So it opens the doorway for less judgment on oneself, I believe. Because if you're in a state of like humor and relaxation, I tend to think less about what it is I'm saying, or I'm more relaxed with who I'm being in that moment, because I feel kind of backed by that, the happiness of that feeling. I think we would all want to go down the more positive route, really, but it can be quite a difficult thing to do. And I've experienced this recently when I've kind of been in my bubble. And when I was there, I wasn't really worried too much about the opinions of other people around me. But then as I began to kind of step out of it a little bit, it became a little bit more scarier to do that. So whereas normally I would just smile at someone and be like, yay, I'm happy. Now it's more the case that I'm smiling at you, but their reaction then makes me feel a certain way, which I think that's probably something that a lot of people would experience, instead of being able to wholeheartedly just go into that smile and that happiness and it not really matter about what's going on around you.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, this is apparently a whole area of kind of newish study where psychology, positive psychology, which is a field, they used to study, they got into the study of positive behaviors. So, for example, laughing, smiling, even hugging, things like this. Why do we do those things, and what do they mean? But then they noticed this sort of weird aspect, which I have also found intriguing, which is less visible. It's called join-in behaviors. So these are behaviors which cause us to join in. Like you join in on a laugh, you join in on a smile, and also you sometimes join in on a conversation. And these are very critical aspects of human civility that we are able to and may or may not enjoy joining in. And we're designed also to join in. We're very manipulated in a good way by our positive social instincts, and more than maybe any other creature, weirdly enough. We have all these sort of factors: smiling, laughing, um, I would say ways of eye contact, singing, dancing. You know, when you dance with people, I saw some new research saying that when you dance with people, you trust them more, which means it doesn't
Mm.
mean, I don't mean like dancing like two people dancing alone in a bar. I mean more if you are just in a small ensemble of people and and you do 5 minutes of dance steps together, you trust those people way more.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense, because as well.
But you might just say, well, that maybe that you did in some nice dance moves, but why does it change your internal psychology? That's kind of interesting to me.
Do you know what? That is really interesting. And my view on that would be that it's like, I do believe that we're all made up of energy, and that's kind of how we exist. So if you are automatically in sync with somebody, you feel it, like you can feel that in your body. And what's made me realize this recently is where a lot of times where I'm working a lot at the moment, I tend to be on my own a lot, but I'm noticing the being on my own a lot. And then what helps me kind of fulfill that lack of loneliness or fill that void is when I'm with my puppy and I'm sitting next to him. Obviously, we don't have any conversation or anything, but I can feel her presence and I can feel that energy. And I'll have these little moments where I'm just like washed over with a wave of like togetherness and connection. And so I think if you're dancing and singing with someone, it's like almost like the portal to the connection there, where you then get a part of them and they get a part of you. And yeah, that's really lovely.
Well, I think you're onto something. I worked as a newspaper reporter, and I was hired at one point to do a 10-part series on the science of positive psychology. And what was interesting about it is I went through all the sort of new developments one by one, some of the things we've been talking about. But I remember that by coincidence, at the same time I was working on the series where they had a big takeout, like they came out once a month. I moved. I had my dream at the time to live in the mountains in a house like away from society by a river. And irony of it was when I finally succeeded, I actually started to get sad and I couldn't figure it out. I was like, I finally got what I wanted. And one of the things, and it just happened that the last part of this newspaper series was about our social nature. And what psychologists are discovering is that we have underestimated our social nature. Our culture underestimates it. We are a very
Mm.
social animal, and we are most happy when we are around either other people or bunches of people. I mean, you know, it's interesting. There's a tradition that you have in the UK that we don't even have in North America, which is the sort of pub tradition, which is, you know, after work or people will gather in the pub, and it's seen as essential. I think by some people, the
Mm.
problem is it sometimes leads to alcoholism,
Yeah.
but but it is seen as an essential part of culture. But that's all the elements are there: joining in, laughter, social connection.
Mm,
And again, we underestimate. We've been told, and I think because our culture does it to us, like, get on your computer, stay in your apartment, you'll be fine.
mm.
No, you won't. You're
Yeah,
a social animal. You need other people.
it's very true. I definitely feel like COVID has a massive knock-on effect of that. I think so many people got
Yeah,
used to just being alone, but even being used to it, you still kind of feel that lack there.
I
And
know.
then trying to jump back into something that you've established such an uncomfortability with can be quite difficult. And I think that's kind of the things that I'm trying to depict, like depict in regards to self development. Like, how do we get past that chasm? How do we take that step from, well, this is how I feel in this place of dread or trauma or inability, to the point of, okay, there's more out there and it's not quite as scary. This is why I felt hypnotherapy was so interesting, because it almost, to me, feels like a shortcut. And I know they don't really exist in life, but it does. It feels like, for me, when I'm trying to get past these places, I'm trying to develop my habits and connect my habits to other habits, new, better ones. Oh, what happened here? There is gone now. Hello. Let's mark this. Eyelashes.
I'm so sorry. That was
Fine.
that was me. You're making a really good point. But sorry, that I saw that my video was hiccuping, so I thought, oh, it's because my browser's open, and I closed my browser, and then I just realized that this Riverside uses my browser, but I
Oh,
realized too late.
that's all right. No,
Do you have to start recording again?
no, I'm still recording. I got a
Okay,
little
so
moment for a
I
little monologue.
understand that. But sorry, keep going though. You were saying that since COVID,
Yeah, I feel like, and I'm obviously just going from a personal point of view and then what I'm seeing around me. Everyone kind of got used to, well, had to get used to being alone because we didn't really have any other choice. And even though it felt very negative, like you say, we're social creatures, um, we just kind of got used to it. And it feels like people have almost just stopped going out so much. And it's not really, people have got used to being antisocial, and it's almost kind of become a little bit more of a norm, which is
I agree.
it's not the best. But then it's also, how do we then step back into that when everyone has now been so programmed to be and experience in that? And that's why I kind of feel like hypnotherapy is almost a shortcut, in the sense that, well, I would be trying to link my old habits to new habits to try and get propel myself forwards, being self-aware. And whereas hypnotherapy, you have the ability to just sit there, let go of everything, and just completely trust someone else and then tell you something, and you just accept it. And there's something about that that is just so, I don't know, it helps me breathe and sleep better a little
Glad
bit.
to hear that. Glad to hear that. Where I would take your point was, I would say, like, one of them. It's funny. I've been doing hypnotherapy for a long time, and what's weird is, like, recently I've noticed the most valuable skill that I find I get from it is teasing things apart. It sounds weird, but so let me
Mm.
explain what I mean. When you tease things apart, you really are able to sometimes create meaningful action. It is great that you can be alone and independent and feel okay. So I'm teasing things apart by saying, yeah, COVID maybe taught you that you could be okay, and you have a way to adapt to being isolated and alone.
Mm.
But we want to tease it apart and go, yeah, but you're a social creature and you need to have a social life and you need to have social meaning to what you do. And those are two different things. And when you conflate them, you get an unhealthy situation. Meaning, one thing I remember about COVID, because I have clients who have agoraphobia, and some of them are on social media with me, and I would notice how delighted they were. They were like, "I'm so glad that COVID is happening because now everybody's like me, hiding out in their house, or And but I understood that as I could see that was very negative because agoraphobia is not a good condition. That means you're
Can you
really
just
afraid of
explain what that
everything.
is, agoraphobia? Because
So
I'm not familiar with that.
so agoraphobia is the phobia of even going outside in the world. So that's where you usually
Mm.
cannot even leave your apartment or house. It is surprisingly common, and it is very treatable. And what is interesting about it is it also has a very clear explanation, which is if an animal is wounded or in a traumatic state, they tend to have a fear of open spaces, meaning going on the subway or walking down the street or being seen in a bar or things like that,
Mm.
which can then sort of steamroll into I cannot even leave my apartment.
Yeah. It's the protection, isn't it?
Yeah. What I think is interesting though is that, as you pointed out, that the pandemic encouraged people to encourage people's antisocial tendencies,
Mm.
which is not a good thing.
No.
Again, I think that happiness in life correlates to social connection.
Yeah.
Feeling like you have friends, maybe a love life, all these things, those are the things that are more likely to produce a happier person.
Yep, hands down, definitely. So I'm just going to have a little look at my phone because I wrote some questions down. In our previous conversation, you had mentioned about, because obviously we've got the NHS, hypnotherapy doesn't tend to be a natural path that gets offered to people in the UK, whereas in America it's more accessible. So what kind of misconceptions would you say that there are of hypnotherapy?
I could go on because there are many. The first most dramatic misconception is the mind control component.
Mm.
Uh, I think that people believe, and they see. So if you go to a stage hypnosis show, you can see people being turned into chickens. So
Mm.
here you are a chicken, or you can have people forget their names. I can do this with people. I can put them into trance, and then they do not know their name. It's not that hard, by the way. And I would say that it is something that anyone could do if they knew the technique.
Mm.
I can see why that makes people nervous. That somebody can, and there's a sort of a perception that somebody is inside your mind when they're doing
Mm.
hypnosis. I've been doing hypnosis for quite a while, and I have never thought of it once as, oh, I'm going to do hypnotherapy with you. I'm going to get inside your mind. I find that, for example, conversation is far more invasive than
Mm.
hypnotherapy. What hypnotherapy really is creating these healthy, super relaxed states where people get access to their own unconscious.
Yeah.
And the important thing, I guess, would be that we are increasingly becoming aware that our unconscious side is bigger than we thought.
Mm.
The reason why Freud got famous, or, I'm simplifying originally, was he was the first guy who said we're 50% unconscious.
Mm.
And then psychologists came along later and they said we're not 50% unconscious, more like 80. And then neuroscientists actually did the math and sort of looked at your brain and figured out like how much of it is aware within your awareness, and they were like it's more like 95.
That's some madness.
Yes,
95% unconscious. What on earth?
you're 95% unconscious.
It
And
kind of makes you
that,
think the possibilities of where we could go and who we could be.
And why, and that is the power of hypnosis, which is it gives us these tools
Mm,
of access to something that we don't normally have access to. We
yeah.
just, the unconscious is just something, and most of us spend half our time like repressing it because we're
Mm.
repressing things that the unconscious offers us. So hypnosis is a management system and an access system for this massive part of our personality.
So what would you say in regards to the things that people like, the repression of that, and why that happens? Because for me that seems like maybe a fear thing or a protective thing, or maybe just a not knowing thing. Mindfulness and being more aware of that 95%, opposed to just being on like an autopilot or living in a space where we're just receiving information as factual without actually knowing everything behind it. So I just feel that's a lot of stuff that I just relayed.
We don't always, but we often repress our unconscious when it offers things that we are uncomfortable with or
Mm.
not ready for. But a classic example would be an addiction. And addictions are a great example. They are largely unconscious. When you're addicted to drinking or smoking or any pattern or habit, you don't consciously think, "Oh, I'm going to become an alcohol addict." It just happens,
Mm.
and then you are now often at war with those feelings or desires. So you're fighting with your unconscious. It also might be in terms of personality. Sometimes, for example, you're in a social situation and you like somebody, which is also unconscious. You look at somebody and you feel good. Well, you would probably hide that because society has taught you don't reveal those kinds of things or
Mm.
be careful how you reveal them. There are just so many kind of basic desires that you would just be tempted to hide and repress. And there's probably things that you're better off hiding, like you don't just say everything that you think; it will
Mm.
get you into trouble.
Try not
So,
to
so
anyway.
these things, so these are some of the reasons why we repress our our basic thoughts or unconscious desires. It's also another example I would throw out is sexuality. I, I'm working on a documentary where we look at how we sort of arrive at our sexuality, and nobody really knows. And
Mm.
and part of a reality would be your sexuality might be telling you to do this, but you would actually want to be that. So again, you end up kind of at war with your own unconscious. So there's a lot of reasons
Mm.
that you come into conflict with your unconscious, and you don't have to be. That's what hypnotherapy offers, is that you sort through your unconscious needs and desires and find better ways of coping and dealing with them.
So kind of like hypnotherapy really is just really delving into the core of who you are and what you're thinking, and removing all that other stuff that maybe has came on board just through living and general conditioning, etc.
Yeah, well, I should explain there are many kinds of hypnotherapy, but I would say, yeah, I mean, basically, this is what's interesting is that when you create profound states of relaxation, it seems like a door
Mm.
opens. So, for example, like if I just said to you right now, you are a chicken, do you notice you didn't become a chicken, right? It didn't
Yeah.
happen. That's because you're not in a hypnotic trance.
Mm.
But if you were in a deeper hypnotic trance, it takes a little bit of time. And I said to
Mm.
you, you start to notice that you have feathers at the edge of your hands and you feel very light and uh, chicken like, and you make chicken noises. And you were in this kind of highly suggestible state. Then you start to become a chicken. We're in the programming codes of behavior. It only happens because the trance is there, usually. The trance is not there, you would be like, no, Albert, I'm not a chicken.
And so that trance that really happens from, is it like a combination of physical touch and pressure? Because I notice on some of your videos, you pull an arm, or you touch someone here or something. So is it usually a mixture of like physical touch, and what is it that actually gets somebody into a trance? Because that in itself is such a powerful thing, and the fact that it does work, so it's quite mind boggling.
So, a very good question. So, within hypnosis, there's a phenomena called the inductions. The induction is a portal to trance, basically. Usually, inductions are conversational, where you just say to someone, sit back, relax, breathe, and they will slip into a hypnotic trance if they want to. Consent is
Mm,
a really big part of it, meaning you can resist these things at any point. You really can. That's one of the myths. I would
mm,
say if you did not want to be hypnotized, you in almost every case can resist it. There might be examples where you didn't know it was happening, but
mm,
even those are, I would say, a little bit ambiguous. But there are some examples of that, of people that have been robbed using hypnosis and things like that. So the second thing you mentioned are these things called rapid or shock inductions, and I did a TEDx about it exactly based on the feeling you just described, which isn't it kind of crazy or shocking that somebody can mess with your hands or shake your hand in a particular way and that puts you into deep trance? Yes. But part of the answer is you there's a framework that must precede the trance, meaning I've explained this in the TEDx that the person has to be made to feel, first of all, has to consent. And I don't mean that in a kind of ethical state, because I mean there's ethical reasons why you must ask for consent, but they have to also go along with it, meaning they have to be
yeah.
willing. Okay, I'm going to give this a shot. If they
Mm,
want to resist, they can. And then the second part is that this is how I would explain it. So shock inductions, which are kind of amazing, and I believe the public should know about. That's why, because I did a TEDx about it. So within about a minute, you can shock somebody into deep trance, sometimes even faster. How does it work? It works by triggering one. It's not well understood, but I think it works by triggering what's called the reorientation reflex. So
mm,
if you think about, so a classic example is there's a great induction called the hand drop induction. So you tell somebody to put their hand on your hand. So that's, if they want to do it, they consent. They put their hand on your hand, and then you say push down. Now they push down, and they're a little bit off balance. If you push down on somebody's hand, you're a little bit kind of off balance right there. So at that exact moment, as they push down, you tell them to close their eyes. When they close their eyes, they've gone from looking out into the world, so they're strictly auditory because they can't see anything. They close their eyes. At that exact moment, you pull your hand away, and all they do is they stumble because they've been pushing down. They stumble. When they stumble, this reorientation reflex triggers. And the reorientation reflex requires that the brain or the consciousness open wide, meaning your brain is basically saying, I don't know what's going on. Something just happened that's crazy. I need to know what's going on. So it's very, very
mm,
open to suggestion. At that exact moment, the hypnotist, if they know what they're doing with exact timing, just simply says, sleep. And because of the timing of it, the person will often drop directly into deep trance within seconds. And that's where you see the person looking like, kind of like, looks like they've
yeah, they go
passed
like
out. They
that.
actually have not passed out. They are present. They can hear everything you're saying. They're experiencing a kind of, and I'm fascinated by this, that it's not understood or the information is not shared with the public because it's also at work in other methods of persuasion.